Welcome back to Swiss Watch Expo. This is Taking Time with Richard and
Jonathan.
And we told you guys last video that we had something special for you, and we do. And so today we're going to talk about military watches, and we think that's a really cool thing, so stick around. So as promised, we do have something special today. Me and I think you guys, if you've seen our videos before, we have mentioned that me and Jonathan are vets, so this is something that's near and dear to our heart. So we're going to talk about military watches, and we got four of them up here. Obviously, there are significantly more watches that have had their name ingrained in American history, other countries' history, and just military history in general. Yeah. But these are the four that we've chosen to talk about today. We've got the IWC, the Cartier, the Breitling, and the Rolex, and we're going to go into the history a little bit, talk about like the modernization of it, and how we got to where we got, and where they sort of started. And so let's start with Cartier, I guess, right?
Yeah, you actually know a lot more about Cartier than I do at this point. Okay.
Which is rare, because I don't know anything about watches compared to you.
I just know that the Santos was the first pilot's wristwatch.
Right.
So
arguably, it's the first wristwatch ever. That's Cartier's claim. So what happened is the watch was made for Santos Dumont, who was what you might consider to be the second predominant aviator of the time. Some people will claim that he was the predominant aviator of the time because when the Wright brothers created their machine, they had to launch it off of a locomotive versus Dumont's machine actually had wheels so it could self-propel itself off the ground.
Really? So
arguably, this is the first actual airplane.
And I was in the Air Force, so I should
you should
know a little bit about that stuff.
So when he was the most predominant figure at that time, being the creator of that. But what he had was a problem because the watches of the time were pocket watches. Mm-hmm. But the machines back then were so crude and rudimentary that he needed full control of the machines. So he needed both hands. So he couldn't actually look at the time, track anything, because he had to let go of the instruments to pull out his watch.
Makes sense.
So he was close friends with Louis Cartier at the time. Yeah. And he asked him to make him something. So Louis Cartier created a watch that would go over the leather flight jacket that he had, and arguably the very first wristwatch ever made.
Interesting.
Yeah. So in terms of aviation, like a lot of the watches that we see now, they have their name ingrained in aviation versus ground troops. I'm an Army guy, so I'm a ground troop kind of guy.
Well, I wasn't flying planes.
No, right. Well,
so.
But there's not as many pivotal watches that lend themselves to the ground troops, but definitely aviation. So I think Cartier is the best place to start here. Likewise, Cartier also had a huge influence. Like the wars, the mechanization of war was also something that really played a huge role in Cartier's history. The Cartier tank was actually based on the tank design of the Renault, the very first man-crafted and driven tank at the time. So if you look down from
World War I or World War II?
World War I, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So I think I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, so it was the tank. So if you look down from a bird's eye view, top-down view, what you see is the
exposed tracks.
You see the exposed tracks. So Cartier used that design when he created the Cartier tank, and there's various models of it. And it's rumored that those watches are created off, the American, the different versions of the tank were modeled after those various versions of the tank. It's also rumored that the track design, if I can show you guys this, the track design that's on the inside of the dial here is a representation of the track's imprints left after the tank goes over the ground. Likewise, the bracelet that typically comes on this is what, again, rumored to be a design characteristic based on the design of the tracks because he was so enamored by the mechanization.
That's crazy.
Yeah, so it's a really cool place. So Cartier,
that's crazy. Yeah, you learn something new every day. I just got schooled in Cartier.
So it was nice. It was nice to learn those things. So it's a nice thing. Like Cartier has this name definitely embedded in the military scene, I think.
Yeah.
And I think the next logical choice to go to might be IWC.
Yeah. This is pretty. It's got a different history than Cartier.
Right.
It's a pilot's watch. It's called the Big Pilot, but it was created for a military unit that we're not going to go a whole lot of into because of just the whole political atmosphere right now and everything. But anyways, it was commissioned by a military unit specifically for pilots because of the supposed low oxygenation of planes flying so high, being so cold. your eyes kind of like start to get a little narrowed effect that,
Right.
you can't focus on multiple things at once.
And the plane just
Yeah.
look like crazy.
So you need
have
something
to see-
big, very legible on your wrist.
Right.
Yeah, the Big Pilot kind of harkens back to that original watch. The original watch is actually like 50 millimeters.
55.
50
55. The military.
I've seen it once, and it's huge.
It's humongous. It's a giant watch. Like
Yeah.
it's outrageous. Like even with the leather suit jacket,
Yeah.
it's like a big old hunking piece of metal.
And even by today's standards, this is a big watch.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's really cool. First, I don't think that this is the first series of this watch,
No,
but
no,
the
no.
first series actually is
The first series was the Uber, and I'm probably pronouncing that incorrectly. But so this is a reincarnation.
well,
of
no, I mean the
watches
first
that we use.
series of the modernization.
I think it was early 2000s. No, but I don't think
They
so.
used like an ETA movement in
Yeah, I
it,
think so.
something like that. It was like a chronometer grade ETA movement.
Right.
Who knew? IWC's and an ETA.
Yeah, so this was like you said, the specs on this were very important. IWC was one of the brands of the one of the five brands that they actually used to commission this watch. So there were five other brands. Again, we can't get into all the companies that had a military influence, but they were one of them. IWC was actually the lesser of the five. They made less pieces than anyone else did. And I think they only made about 1,000 units of it. But again, like you were saying, out of all the watches that we have, this is probably the one that was most purpose-built for the military specifically, because the government actually issued these out before missions. The pilots didn't get to keep them. They had to return them at the end of the mission. But I would say that this is probably the one that has truly been a device and used
As a
for
tool.
as a tool specifically for pilots.
Yeah.
And then, there was two different variations of this dial when it came out. It was this one, which was big and bold, very, very open. IWC did this one only. And there was another Type A version of it where it had the smaller sub-dial on the inside of it with the hour markers.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and so this was the IWC. IWC stuck to this movement very specifically. They never
Yeah.
changed it. So that's why we see it in the version that we do now. So what do we go to next?
I think Rolex.
Rolex, yeah.
Yeah. So Rolex, I know a little bit about this because I studied quite a bit of history, especially special operations sort of stuff.
Right.
I wasn't special operations directly, but I got the privilege of working with many special operations units whenever I was in. Anyways, I did a little bit of history digging whenever I was in the military. And actually, the U.S. military issued Rolexes in like the mid-'60s all the way through Vietnam.
Right. Along with
As-
cigarettes.
Hey, that was World War II, too.
You got a pack of cigarettes and a Rolex.
Yeah, essentially.
Imagine a day where you just got handed a Rolex.
Yeah, right. But anyways, yeah, they had issued Rolex, especially like the likes of Navy SEALs, Special Forces, Green Berets, got Rolexes essentially as standard issue pieces.
Right.
Now, this is not what you call a mil spec
Right.
Rolex. Mil spec Rolexes are literally a certain Rolex Submariner that is built to a certain specification by the issuing unit.
Right.
So, like Special Forces, Navy SEALs had them.
Right.
They had fixed spring. I can't talk today.
Okay.
Okay, fixed
You had
spring
the problem I
bars.
usually have.
Yeah, fixed spring bars. They had tritium dials.
Right. And the NATO strap.
Yeah.
You know what I found out about the NATO strap? This is neat. I mean, we were both in. So
Yeah.
The NATO strap was one of those things that we kind of continue to call nylon or cloth straps today, NATO straps. But what that meant is back in the day when they first made this, it was not a NATO issue strap, but the nomenclatures that they used to identify part numbers were associated with the NSN or NATO serial number system. So the strap actually had its own part number within the United States military.
Makes
and
sense
the NATO.
because the original ones were actually parachute cord.
Exactly, yeah. And so like that was a neat thing to figure out because it's actually literally you can look it up and they have documentation of this thing actually having a part number back in the day. So it was neat.
Cool.
Well, yeah, different thing altogether. But Rolex has had tons of different things that they've made for various military uses. I would probably say they have they've done the Air King for different branches. I can't tell you all the different ones. They've made it for Saudi Arabia. They've made it for Israel. They've made it.
Yeah. Well, it's the stamp.
Yeah.
I don't think that they made it for those.
Yeah. But then they have like the Thunderbird, like the Turnograph watch that is often referred to as a Thunderbird was one of those watches they issued for the demonstration Air Force teams and things like that. So specifically the Thunderbirds is why it got its nickname. So Cool thing.
Not just that, but Sean Connery.
Yeah, Sean Connery. Yeah.
Rest in peace.
Yeah.
James Bond did wear, as in the original James Bond movies,
1963.
Rolex.
3.
And he was secret service,
Yeah.
essentially, for British military.
Right.
British government. Anyways, let's move on to Breitling, another British brand.
All right.
Weird. Anyways, yeah, so this is probably the most modern military watch that we have in our inventory actually right now. It's literally still being used by special operations units worldwide.
Right.
This is the aerospace.
Ton of use.
Yes, and this is the most, do-it-all kind of watch that you can probably buy.
Right.
Short of a mechanical piece that is strictly built time only, kind of for like a rough and rugged kind of situation.
Yeah.
This thing, I mean, it's got a compass on it. It's got chronograph function. It's got date. It's got obviously time, but I mean, it's got GPS location.
Right. Yeah.
I mean,
it's got a lot of bang for the buck in this. I mean, and Breitling has their name etched in history too, because I mean, in 1930, actually, no, it was 1934, they created the first 2-pusher chronograph. So before that...
Was that Willie Breitling?
It was exactly. It was Willie Breitling. So he was actually 16 at the time. So he was, when his father died, rest in peace, he was only 14. And he finally took over the company when he was 16 years old. And then he had the wherewithal to decide that a single-pusher chronograph didn't make much sense in terms of an applicable utilitarian use. So he thought that if being able to stop and start without having to reset made some sense. So he commissioned that. And so not only that, and he made the first 2-pusher chronograph in 1934. He also made when he was at the helm anyway, Breitling created the first onboard chronograph watch for inside the cockpits of many planes. So that was one of those things that they just...
I remember seeing something about that in my Breitling training. We used to work for a Breitling authorized dealer, and we had to go through trainings.
Right, yeah. And it's kind of, honestly, it looked a little bit like a Bell & Ross currently. It's got the square instrument panel with the circle dial and everything, and it had a pusher and then a restart button. So that's when they were huge in the aviation industry back in the day, because almost everything that they made had one of these watches on it. They're huge in the industry. So this is sort of like the culmination of everything you need in a watch. And if you got the compass and you got the analog and the digital, separate time zones, you can time things. You can set alarms. You can do. I mean, there's almost nothing you can't do on this watch.
As long as it's got a battery in it, it's set.
Yeah, I mean, so it's just a really cool watch.
Yeah.
And let's do the same thing we always do. Which one's your favorite, man?
Got to be the Rolex.
Got to be the Rolex. I mean, this is a 1680, so that's a really cool one. But I don't know why this one in particular. Just because it's a Rolex.
Well, no. It's one of the subs that harkens back to like the tool age, and I need something on my wrist that's going to perform. It's going to be bare bones, basic. I don't like an overcomplicated watch.
Right. So I would go with the Breitling, specifically because it has a compass on it. So if you don't want to, if you're a tacked out kind of guy like I was back in the day, I was a foot soldier, so I stayed on the ground all the time, and land nav was a very important part of what we did. And so having a compass and being able to associate where you are, shooting a back azimuth or a forward azimuth, or having the ability to track where you've been and where you're going was just one of the most important things for me. And the idea of being able to set something multiple time zones and things like that, if you
start fumbling around with your compass and the map.
Exactly. I got family in Louisiana. I got family in Georgia, so I'm across seas and things like that. Being able to know what time zone they're in is give me an opportunity to know exactly when I can call them and that sort of stuff, because I'm across the world, that sort of stuff. So I'd go with the Breitling. Even though I'm not an aviator, it has a lot of function for me as a ground troop as well.
Definitely. Another thing too is, obviously this is a military aesthetics kind of tool watch video, just to give you kind of idea, but we do want to recognize, what's going on in the world right now and the political environment. And, we're both veterans. We've got veterans that work here with us at SwissWatchExpo, and we just wanted to say, stay safe out there. All right.
Make it home. Your families need you. Do what you got to do to get back, and be heroes. You're already heroes in our eyes. So
yeah.
We'll see you when you get back, and see you next time on SwissWatchExpo. Like, subscribe, hit the bell, do all the grand things, and we'll catch you next time on Taking Time.